They say when you play with fire, you get burned. But what happens when you throw away the person who was secretly controlling that fire all along? My name might not matter to you right now, but by the end of this story, you'll remember it forever. Because this is about the day I watched a billionaire destroy himself by underestimating the one woman who knew exactly where all his bodies were buried. Vincent Crawford thought he could discard me like yesterday's newspaper when someone shinier came along. He had no idea that I wasn't just his girlfriend for 3 years. I was the invisible architect of his entire empire. Every algorithm that made him millions, mine. Every brilliant strategy that dominated headlines, mine. Every secret that could topple his kingdom, sitting right there in my personal files. Files, waiting for the right moment. When he left me for Isabella Montgomery, some socialite heiress with the right pedigree and political connections, he thought he was upgrading his life. Poor Vincent had no clue he'd just handed his worst enemy everything she needed to destroy him. And the beautiful irony, he trained me himself, taught me every dirty trick, showed me every hidden weakness in his armor, never once thinking I'd be smart enough to use it against him. You see, there's something intoxicating about watching someone who treated you like you were disposable realize they just threw away the only person keeping them from complete annihilation. Vincent learned that lesson the hard way. And if you love stories about karma, justice, and watching arrogant men get exactly what they deserve, then you're going to want to hit that like button right now and subscribe. Because I'm about to tell you a story that's never been told before. The story of how I took everything from the man who thought I was nothing. Let me take you back to where it all began. Because every good revenge story starts with trust. The kind of blind, stupid trust that makes you believe someone actually sees your worth. My name is Nia Baptiste, and 3 years ago, I was that girl everyone warned you about. The one who fell for her boss. But this wasn't some cliché office romance. I had graduated summa cum laude from MIT with degrees in computer science and business analytics. I could code circles around most of Silicon Valley, but somehow I ended up as Vincent Crawford's executive assistant. That title should have been my first red flag. Vincent owned Crawford Industries, this tech empire that seemed to print money. Artificial intelligence, data mining, predictive algorithms. If it involved making computers think like humans, Vincent's company dominated the market. At least that's what everyone believed. The tech magazines called him a visionary. Forbes put him on their cover. The man could do no wrong in the public eye. But here's what nobody knew. I was the wizard behind the curtain. Every morning, I'd arrive at Vincent's penthouse office before dawn. Not to fetch his coffee, but to solve the problems that kept him awake at night. When his development team hit a wall with machine learning protocols, I'd work through the night writing code that would break through in ways they couldn't imagine. When investors demanded projections that seemed impossible, I'd create algorithms that could predict market trends with scary accuracy. Vincent would walk into boardroom meetings armed with my innovations, my strategies, my brilliance, and he'd present them like they came straight from his own genius mind. The standing ovations, the lucrative contracts, the respect from industry titans, all of it built on work I did in the shadows while the world thought I was just scheduling his appointments. And God help me, I loved him for it. Not because he was using me, but because I thought we were partners. He'd come home to our shared penthouse, wrap his arms around me, and whisper about our future and our empire. When he'd take me on business trips to Tokyo or London, I felt like we were conquering the world together, even though I was always introduced as his assistant, never his girlfriend, and certainly never as the brain behind his success. For 3 years, I lived this double life. By day, I was the invisible woman, making Vincent Crawford look like a tech god. By night, I was the woman he claimed to love, the one he promised would be by his side when he changed the world. I wrote his speeches, managed his public image, solved his impossible problems, and somehow convinced myself that being essential to his success meant I was essential to his heart. Looking back now, I realize I was so busy building his empire that I never stopped to ask myself a simple question. What happens to the architect when the king decides he wants a different castle? I should have seen the warning signs. I should have protected myself. But when you're in love with someone who's become your whole world, you miss the obvious truth staring you in the face, that you're not building a life together, you're just building his life for him. The first crack in my perfect illusion came on a Tuesday morning in March. Vincent was on a call when I walked into his office, and something about his voice made me pause behind the door. It wasn't his usual commanding business tone. This was softer, intimate, the way he used to talk to me during our late-night conversations when we'd plan our future together. "I can't wait to see you tonight, Isabella," he was saying, and my blood turned to ice. "The charity gala will be perfect. Everyone who matters will be there." Isabella Montgomery. I knew that name from the society pages. Old money, political dynasty, the kind of woman who'd been groomed since birth to marry power and influence. She was everything I wasn't. Blonde, connected, born into the world Vincent desperately wanted to belong to. While I was brilliant with algorithms, she was brilliant with people who mattered. The next few weeks became a masterclass in emotional torture. Vincent started bringing Isabella to business events, introducing her as his dear friend, while I stood 3 steps behind them, invisible in my role as his assistant. I watched her laugh at his jokes, jokes I had written for him. I watched her hang on his every word during presentations about innovations I had created. The worst part? She was genuinely nice to me, treating me with the kind of polite kindness you show to good help. I kept telling myself it was just business networking, that Vincent needed political connections for his company's government contracts. But then came the night that shattered everything. I was working late in the office when Vincent returned from dinner, and Isabella was with him. They didn't see me in the conference room, but I could hear everything. "She's perfect for what I needed back then," Vincent was saying, and I knew he was talking about me. "Nia's brilliant, don't get me wrong, but brilliant isn't enough anymore. I need someone who opens doors, not just writes code." Isabella understands my world in ways Nia never could. Isabella's response was like a knife. "Well, you can always keep her as your assistant. She seems devoted." They laughed together, and something inside me died. Not broke, died. Because in that moment, I realized that 3 years of my life, 3 years of building his empire, 3 years of believing we were partners, had been nothing more than an extended job interview that I was apparently failing. The breakup came 2 weeks later. Vincent didn't even have the decency to do it privately. He called me into his office during business hours, the same office where I'd solved his impossible problems and written his most important speeches. "This thing between us has run its course, Nia," he said, not even looking up from his computer. "You've been incredible, but I'm moving in a different direction, personally and professionally." When I asked about everything we'd built together, everything we'd planned, he finally looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes I'd seen him use on business rivals. "You were great for what we had, but Isabella fits my world better. I hope you understand." I understood perfectly. I just wasn't the right kind of woman for a man who'd decided he wanted to be king. The first week after Vincent discarded me, I did what any heartbroken woman does. I cried. I raged. I questioned everything about myself. Friends tried to console me with the usual breakup platitudes. "You deserve better. His loss. You'll find someone who appreciates you." But their words felt hollow because they didn't understand the real betrayal. This wasn't just about losing a boyfriend. This was about watching someone steal credit for my life's work and then throw me away like I was nothing. It was during one of those sleepless nights, staring at my laptop screen through tears, that everything clicked into place. I wasn't scrolling through social media or job listings. I was looking at my files, 3 years worth of work, algorithms I'd written that revolutionized Vincent's predictive analytics division, code I'd created that powered his most profitable AI systems, strategies I'd developed that had secured contracts worth hundreds of millions. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold and my heart race at the same time. Vincent's financial records. The real ones, not the sanitized versions he showed investors. I'd had access to everything as his assistant, and I'd been meticulous about keeping copies for our shared future. Tax shelters in the Cayman Islands. Insider trading based on predictive models I'd built. Government contracts secured through deliberately misleading capability demonstrations. Vincent hadn't just stolen my work. He'd built his entire empire on a foundation of lies and illegal activities. And I had documented proof of every single crime. That's when the grief transformed into something much more dangerous. Clarity. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman who'd just realized she was holding enough ammunition to destroy a king. The plan formed slowly, methodically. First, I registered Baptiste Technologies, quietly incorporating while Vincent was busy planning his engagement party with Isabella. I used my own savings and a small business loan. Nothing that would raise red flags. Then I reached out to former colleagues who'd always respected my work, offering freelance consulting services. Within 2 months, I had my first client, Meridian Corp., one of Vincent's biggest competitors. They'd been struggling with machine learning applications that were mysteriously similar to problems I'd solved for Vincent years ago. Funny how quickly I could help them break through those barriers. My breakthrough came when I perfected an algorithm Vincent's team had been wrestling with for months. The same algorithm I'd started developing for Crawford Industries, but never finished before our breakup. Baptiste Technologies launched it first, and it was revolutionary. Suddenly, Vincent's clients were asking why their systems couldn't do what this unknown startup was offering. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. Vincent thought he was getting rid of dead weight when he dumped me, but he'd actually thrown away his secret weapon. Every innovation his company had been built on came from my mind, and now I was using those same skills to systematically outmaneuver him in every market he thought he owned. Watching Vincent's stock price drop while mine soared felt better than any revenge I could have imagined. But I was just getting started. 6 months later, Vincent's world was crumbling, and he still had no idea I was the earthquake that had shaken his foundation. Baptiste Technologies had secured 3 major contracts that Crawford Industries had been counting on, and my innovations were making headlines, while his company scrambled to keep up with solutions I'd created years ago, but never implemented under his name. The federal investigation began on a Thursday. I'll never forget that day because I was in a board meeting when my assistant handed me a news alert on her tablet. Crawford Industries under federal investigation for financial irregularities. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the intoxicating rush of watching karma finally arrive at Vincent's doorstep. You see, I hadn't just taken my talents and run. Those financial records I'd discovered, those documents proving Vincent's illegal activities, I'd spent months carefully organizing them, cross-referencing transactions, building an airtight case. Then, through an anonymous attorney, I delivered everything to the Securities and Exchange Commission with a neat little bow. The beautiful part was that I'd been meticulous about keeping clean hands. Every document was something I'd legally possessed as his former executive assistant. Every piece of evidence was copied from files I'd had legitimate access to during our relationship. I wasn't a whistleblower seeking revenge. I was a concerned citizen reporting financial crimes I'd inadvertently discovered. Isabella Montgomery was the first rat to flee the sinking ship. Within 48 hours of the investigation going public, she released a statement through her family's publicist, expressing deep concern about the allegations and announcing the end of her relationship with Vincent to protect her family's reputation and political aspirations. The confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating happened 3 weeks later. Vincent burst into my office in my building with my name on the door, looking like he'd aged a decade in 6 months. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and those cold, calculating eyes that had dismissed me so cruelly were now wild with desperation. "You did this," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You destroyed everything we built together." I leaned back in my chair, the CEO chair that should have been mine from the beginning, and smiled with a calmness that surprised even me. "We didn't build anything together, Vincent. I built it. You just took credit and convinced yourself you were the genius. You can't prove any of this was your work," he spat, but we both knew he was lying. "I don't need to prove it," I replied, gesturing to the wall behind me where my patents hung, all filed after our breakup, but based on innovations I'd created years ago. The market already has. Baptiste Technologies is worth more than Crawford Industries ever was, and I did it in 6 months with the ideas you threw away when you threw me away. The last thing I said to Vincent Crawford was something I'd been saving for this moment. "You taught me that in this world, only results matter." Well, here are my results. He was arrested 2 days later. 1 year later, I'm standing in what used to be Vincent Crawford's corner office, but the nameplate on the door now reads Baptiste Industries, CEO Naya Baptiste. The federal prosecutors offered me a deal I couldn't refuse: testify about Vincent's financial crimes in exchange for the opportunity to purchase Crawford Industries' assets at a fraction of their former value. Turns out, when your company is built on illegal activities and the mastermind behind your innovations is your competition, there aren't many buyers willing to take the risk. Vincent got 15 years for securities fraud, tax evasion, and insider trading. Isabella married a senator's son 6 months after his arrest. Apparently, her taste in powerful men was more flexible than her loyalty. But here's the twist that still makes me smile every morning when I walk into this office. Vincent's legal team tried to argue that I was equally responsible for the company's success and should share in the criminal liability. That's when I produced the 3 years' worth of personal journals, time-stamped computer files, and email backups showing exactly who created what and when. Every algorithm, every innovation, every breakthrough, all documented with my digital signature, all created during the hours I was supposedly just assisting Vincent with his administrative needs. The prosecution's case became ironclad, and mine became invisible. The most satisfying moment wasn't watching Vincent get sentenced, though that was pretty sweet. It was the day I signed the papers to rename Crawford Industries as Baptiste Industries. The same company that had hidden my contributions for 3 years now bears my name on every patent, every product, every press release. The invisible woman finally became visible, and it turns out the world was ready to see what I could do when I wasn't hiding behind someone else's ego. They say the best revenge is massive success, but I think they're only half right. The best revenge is massive success built on the foundation of your own brilliance, watched by the person who was too blind to see your worth when they had the chance. Vincent thought he was trading up when he chose Isabella over me. He thought he was getting rid of dead weight, clearing space for someone who fit his image better. What he actually did was hand his greatest asset to his biggest competition and then wonder why he couldn't compete anymore. So here's the lesson I want you to remember. Never underestimate the person who knows all your secrets, especially when that person is the one who's been building your empire while you've been taking all the credit. If this story of karma and justice gave you the chills you were looking for, smash that like button right now, because stories like this don't tell themselves. Subscribe for more untold stories of revenge, redemption, and watching arrogant people get exactly what they deserve, and drop a comment below. I want to know what you would have done in my position. Would you have taken Vincent down, or would you have just walked away? Because sometimes the best way to move forward is to make sure the people who underestimated you never forget your name.